For New Haven's renowned civic champion, George Dudley Seymour, history, landmarks, architecture, city planning, and even trees were a contact sport. Seymour was the greatest champion Connecticut ever had because he knew it whole and he loved it all. He was the prophet of place, and he made Connecticut the focus of his life's work. In 1913, when Yale awarded Seymour an honorary degree for his activism, the testimony noted that while neither New Haven-born nor a son of Yale, Seymour became New Haven's greatest champion. A born antiquarian, he studied the future as well as the past of our city. He preached the beauty of order, the harmonies of civic art, and the duty and value of municipal foresight. Seymour was born and raised in Clocktown, Bristol, Connecticut, a then booming industrial center most famous for clock manufacturing. His schooling brought him to Hartford High, where he graduated in 1878, followed by Trinity College and the law school at George Washington College in D.C. Seymour settled in New Haven, where he and the Earl brothers hung their shingle as patent attorneys, a lucrative business in a state with the most patents per capita in America. As early as 1890, he became involved in civic affairs, joining the Church, the Society of Colonial Wars, and the Sons of the American Revolution. He emulated his hero, Connecticut and New Haven historian John Warner Barber. Then in 1906, at the age of 47, he emerged as an activist and public figure with a campaign to block the New Haven Public Library from erecting a new building on the historic north side of the Green. Working with John Day Jackson at the New Haven Register, he published a denunciation of the building plan. The campaign failed, but led him to see that the issue of citing the library belonged to a larger failure of civic planning. As dozens of op-eds on an array of civic issues followed, his influence grew. He next waged a campaign to restore architect David Hoadley's 1814 masterpiece, North Church, by removing the white paint that concealed the elegance of its brick construction. He succeeded, making it one of the opening acts in historic preservation. Before the houses known as Quality Row were demolished, he hired photographer Myron Philly to document what would soon be destroyed. My idea has always been to photograph everything, architectural details, furniture, and other antiques in the houses, all worth being photographed, a mindset almost unheard of at the time. He believed that the art of architecture was underappreciated and made the first studies of New Haven architects Ithiel Town, Henry Austin, and David Hoadley, who he dubbed the self-taught architect of Waterbury, who gave New Haven and its green so much elegance. In 1925, he curated an exhibition about Hoadley at the Mattituck Museum. In 1908, Seymour was a founding member of the Walpole Society, a club whose members launched the American Wing at the Met, the American Collections at MFA Boston, founded Whittier Museum, Historic New England, Historic Deerfield, Connecticut Landmarks, and more. He was invited to join the board of Wadsworth Atheneum, where he was the first to advocate collecting and displaying Connecticut furniture and antiques. He built the first collection of Connecticut furniture, which went on display there in 1918. The collection was eventually donated to Connecticut Historical Society with funds to publish this catalog. George Dudley Seymour did more than anyone to secure Nathan Hale's fame as a Revolutionary War patriot and martyr. He commissioned a statue for the quadrangle at Yale, Hale's alma mater. "I wish to be useful," Hale said, "and every kind of service necessary to the public good becomes honorable by being necessary." "Can anything be finer than this?" asked President Calvin Coolidge years later. Presidents William Howard Taft, Harry Truman, and Dwight Eisenhower also weighed in on Hale's significance as a national role model. In 1914, Seymour bought and began a 30-year project to restore and furnish the Nathan Hale homestead, which he eventually donated to Antiquarian and Landmark Society, where he was a founding trustee. He also lobbied the U.S. Postal Service to issue a Nathan Hale stamp and published his documentary life of Nathan Hale. City planning was a new idea in 1907 when Seymour advocated for a New Haven Plan Commission, which he chaired. Frederick Olmsted and architect Cass Gilbert prepared a plan, one of the nation's first. Seymour became known as the father of the City Beautiful movement, and beautiful is how he remembered New Haven and wished to preserve it. In 1909, he hired Myron Philly to document the woeful conditions of the Elms City's elms and advocated for spraying and the employment of an expert to begin replanting and the systematic care of city trees. New Haven became the first city in America to employ an arborist to look after their trees. He made friends in high places. Gifford Pinchot, the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service, created in 1905, on his watch they developed a conservation ethic and introduced the idea of scientific management to American forestry. Pinchot is known as the father of American conservation and of Yale School of Forestry, founded in 1900. From monuments, preservation, and forestry, Seymour went on to champion urban parks, successfully lobbying the federal government to transfer former military sites in New Haven to create Lighthouse Point and Fort Hale parks. In 1916, he played a key role in shaping how Yale celebrated its 200th anniversary, and also in New Haven's 300th in 1938. Seymour's papers, donated to Yale's Sterling Library after his death, are extensive and include correspondence with a who's who of American art, architecture, city planning, and preservation at the time, including with pioneer preservation architect Norman Isham, who wrote the first book on Connecticut architecture and was involved in restoring the Brick Market in Newport, the Highland House in Guilford, Connecticut, the Stephen Hopkins House in Providence, Rhode Island, and the Whitfield House in Guilford, Connecticut. New Haven architect J. Frederick Kelly wrote books on Connecticut architecture and meeting houses, and was an architect involved in countless restorations. William Sumner Appleton, the founding director of the Society for the Preservation of New England Antiquities, founded in 1909, Seymour joined its board in 1930 and corresponded with Appleton regularly for 30 years. He was friends with Wallace Nutting, the best-known champion for early American antiques and the author of the State's Beautiful series. In 1915, he advised the Connecticut Society of Colonial Dames Old House Committee on conducting the first statewide survey and analysis of old houses. He was friends with John Ferguson Weir, a painter and the first director of the Yale Art School, and with John Henry Niemeyer, who taught drawing at Yale Art School and did this portrait of Seymour. Seymour was a champion and patron of women artists at a time when many official channels were closed to them, including Mary Rogers Williams, who taught and managed the gallery at Smith College and painted this portrait of George as the connoisseur. Cecilia Bow was an American Society portraitist who painted this portrait of George, known as the Green Cloak. Today, the fields of place-conscious education, urban planning, historic preservation, antiques, and a reverence for local history are all elements of an evolving place-making movement. It was never just about making pretty spaces, but a holistic attitude aimed at making and sustaining places worth caring about. Think local is the movement's creed. Writing about Seymour in 1931, the Hartford Courant noted that it is rare that a man with the historical interests of Mr. Seymour combines them with so keen an understanding of the present problems of the state. I've been involved with art, architecture, local history, and historic preservation for years. Until excavating this story, I did not see the interdependence of these elements. Amazingly, Seymour saw it all so clearly and so much earlier than most. He could never have imagined the place-wrecking effect of homogenization, globalization, and sprawl that they would have on the world he loved. The way of the reformer is hard, Seymour wrote, and requires continuous study, patience, and the ability to bear frustration, derision, and disappointments. All in all, his mission is also still ours, to sustain the places we care about, leave the world as well off as it was left to us, train young and old for duties of citizenship, and assure that Connecticut's future is ecologically sound, culturally rich, and economically sustainable. There has never been anyone in politics, art, or industry who demonstrated more clearly how that is done.